Good evening, I'm Leslie Ahom. Thank you for joining us this evening for this special presentation. We're broadcasting from Municipal Cable Channel 8 in the Boulder Public Library. This evening's program is an opportunity for Boulder Police Chief Tom Kobe to address the citizens of Boulder and for some of our local media to ask questions. Let me start by introducing Boulder Police Chief Tom Kobe. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Leslie.
I'd like to introduce our media guests, Jim Burris with the Boulder Planet. Welcome, Jim.
Good evening.
Allie Krupski with the Boulder Daily Camera. Welcome, Allie. Ron Baird with the Colorado Daily. Thank you for joining us, Ron. Mike McPhee with the Denver Post. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
And Kevin McCullen with the Rocky Mountain News. Welcome,
Hi.
Kevin.
Thank you.
What we'd like to do this evening is begin with a statement, some remarks by Boulder Police Chief Tom Kobe, and that will be followed by questions from our reporters. So without further ado, Boulder Police Chief Tom Kobe. Tom?
Thank you, Leslie. 2 weeks ago today, a violent criminal act took away from this community one of our innocents, JonBenet Ramsey. She did not deserve to be killed, for she had done nothing in her young life to harm anyone. We are grieving as a community for our loss. I hope to use this forum as a means to aid that process. I hope to provide insight into this event that has been difficult to communicate because of the inherent conflict between the media's desire to provide all the information they can obtain and the Boulder Police Department's desire to protect the integrity of our investigation. I've had many members of this community ask me about comments indicating that there's a killer loose in our community. The question this raises, is there a need for community members to be fearful? There's no question that there's a person or persons responsible for this act who have not been apprehended. It is my advice now, as it is at any time, that we need to be vigilant with respect to persons who might do us harm. But this needs to be kept in perspective. In this country, for the last 2 years, 65% of the homicides have been cleared. That means that in 35% of the cases of murder in the United States, the person responsible has not been apprehended. The reality we all live with every day is that we have many dangerous people in this community and communities across the country who are walking the streets. We all know this intellectually. However, we never really have to deal with it until it strikes close to us. We were not living in fear before this incident, and we cannot be forced to live in fear now. It is the best judgment of the Boulder Police Department that this is a one-time occurrence. The killing of JonBenet does not appear to be linked to any other similar event. What this means is that we do not believe we have a serial situation to deal with. Should the Boulder community be concerned and vigilant? Yes. Should we be living in fear? No. Can I guarantee that this will not occur again? No, I cannot. There have been many stories and much speculation about who killed JonBenet. This is an area that I know will be explored in greater detail in the questions to follow. Let me offer perspective on this issue. Prejudging and media hype have never solved a crime. Crime solving requires diligent and careful police work. That is exactly what the Boulder Police Department is committed to doing. It is a natural response to a tragedy like this for the community to want to know immediately who is responsible. It is often an effort to assure ourselves that such a tragedy will never happen to us. The reality of the situation is that often these types of investigations take time to solve. The integrity and the competence of the men and women of the Boulder Police Department have been challenged. Let me first say that I have never had the privilege of working with more competent, dedicated professionals. They are getting the job done. We will not lose the focus of this investigation to respond to meaningless and unfounded remarks. This organization is well respected in our community. That respect has been earned over many years because of the level of competent service we have provided. Again, it is unfortunate that those who have anointed themselves as experts have seized the opportunity to offer criticism which has no basis in fact. Let me assure the citizens of Boulder that the men and women of this department are doing everything that can be done to solve this case. All of the resources that my people have needed to do their work have been provided. Our success is very good in homicide investigations. Over the last 5 years, from 1990 through 1995, we have had 15 homicides in Boulder. We have solved 13 of them. That means that we have an 85% rate of success with these investigations. We are not working on this investigation alone. When we have needed assistance, we have reached out to those who could help, who could provide that help. Alex Hunter, the district attorney, has had his personnel working with us from the first hours of this investigation. George Epp, Boulder County Sheriff, has provided us support in the areas of crime scene search and interviewing of witnesses. Pat Ahlstrom, Director of the Colorado Department of Public Safety, has the Colorado Bureau of Investigations processing the evidence we have submitted as quickly and effectively as possible. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, Denver and Boulder offices, has provided us its expertise as we have asked for it. This violent act has deeply affected the members of the Boulder Police Department. We are fortunate that we work in an environment where we have not built up the hardened shell which you often find in other communities. But that means we still feel for the victims of violent crime. We are vulnerable. Many of us are parents who have felt this loss very deeply. We are doing our own debriefings within the organization to deal with our grief, just as community members are participating in debriefings to help themselves cope. The support we have received from the community means a great deal to us. Thank you. On behalf of the Boulder Police Department, I would like to publicly acknowledge the political leadership of this community. As much publicity as there has been around this incident, it would be very easy for it to become political. This has not happened. Mayor Leslie Durgan, our City Council, and City Manager Tim Honey have never wavered in their support of this organization. Their steady hand in this matter has enabled us to go forward with this investigation without distraction. Because of their steadfast support, they have enhanced our capacity to solve this case. They have honored their role as community leaders. And last, before we get into the questioning, let me be very clear about the focus of the Boulder Police Department in this matter. Our allegiance is solely to JonBenet Ramsey. We have a mission. We have dedicated ourselves to bringing justice the person or persons responsible for her death. Everything else is secondary, and we will not be deterred. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Tom. What we'd like to do now is turn to our reporters. We have 20 or 25 minutes, and so if we can keep questions short, we'll get more questions in. And if there's a follow-up question, let's go ahead and ask that. And Kevin, I'd like to start with you, please.
Alrighty. Tom, when we talked about a week ago, I'd asked you at that point if you had, based on the information you know, were confident, had a degree of confidence that you would make an arrest in this case at some point. Weeks gone by, and I guess same question again. Had anything that you've come across or given you some confidence?
Well, Kevin, there's three things that can happen in any investigation like this. One, it's a smoking gun case where it's solved very quickly. You show up and the person who's responsible is standing there waiting for you. Second is that you never solve the case. And the third thing that can happen is it takes a while to work things out and work through the investigation. This case, it's obvious, is not the first situation. It's an investigation that is complex and complicated and will take some time to work out.
Allie?
What can you tell us about the girl's death? Can you discuss the time, the location, whether she was killed in her bedroom or in the basement? you talk about whether she was tortured or whether she died quickly?
You're going to have to be a little more specific than that. As you know, one of the difficulties that we're dealing with is the desire for great detail that is a media interest, but has a negative impact on our ability to solve this case. And so it's very difficult, impossible for me to talk about specifics, particularly the list that you just ran off, without considering each one closely because of their potential impact, negative impact on our ability to resolve this investigation. So, try again.
So you cannot discuss then the time. I've heard that she was killed in her bedroom. Can you comment on that fact?
Allie, again, I'll just repeat myself. I cannot comment about those things that only the person or persons responsible might have knowledge about and the police investigators might have knowledge about, because that has a negative potential impact on this case.
Okay.
Jim?
Are you confident that the evidence gathered in this case was handled properly?
I'm very confident of that. In fact, we have utilized a great deal of technology in collecting the evidence. One of the difficulties in this case is the amount of evidence that we have collected, and that evidence has to be processed, which is going to take some time.
Ron?
Yeah, Chief, early in the investigation, I think it was Leslie at the press conference confirmed just about the first and only fact that you guys have released, and that was that the older siblings were out of state at the time of the murder. Is that?
Time, I think I used the word incident, but...
Incident, okay. Are you still comfortable with that, conclusion?
Yes, we're comfortable with the things that people have told us, that we have verified those facts.
Mike?
Tom, quite a bit of information has come out about the police investigation the morning of December 26th. For everyone who's confused now, can you reconstruct exactly what happened? And I have two specific issues I'd like you to address. Was the family interviewed after the body was found? And did police search the house after the 911 call, but before the body was found?
Well, you've loaded up three things, and it's going to take me some time.
Well, they're all part of the reconstruction.
It's going to take me some time to work through that. I think what people have a hard time understanding is what was going on in the early hours that morning. And you have to understand that what the Boulder Police Department was originally called to respond to was a kidnapping, an in-progress kidnapping, in that the little girl was gone. Her parents got up and found her gone. And so the officers who responded set up and followed the procedure for dealing with that kind of a situation, which means that they did a preliminary search of the house. And remember, this is a very big house. It took us 8 days to work through this house. And they were just trying to determine if there was anything obvious that they needed to pay attention to.
The police did this.
The police did that. And then they shifted into managing, putting themselves, putting in place what they needed to manage what they assumed was going to be an ongoing event that had timelines attached to it and other things. And they immediately started calling in additional resources. We were gearing up to manage a kidnapping situation. That included calling in the FBI, bringing the FBI in from both the Denver and Boulder office. The Denver office sent down some of their specialty people in this area. And so that was what was going on. We were managing an incident that we anticipated was going to be ongoing, and there was no reason not to believe that it would. If you analyze or go back and research all of the kidnapping cases, this is a very unusual case. It is very unusual to have occur what occurred in this. So our focus was in managing the event we were presented with, taking the precautions that were necessary, but managing the event that was before us. Okay, did I hit the other two parts of that?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Well, you did say that the police searched the house.
Correct.
Before the body was found. Was the family interviewed after the body was found?
As you know, Mike, we were with the family for quite a period of time during the first day, and there's a difference between talking to the parents and being able to interview the parents. There's no way to interview parents at that point in time. It's impossible. And so were we communicating with John and Patsy? Yes, we were. Were we interviewing John and Patsy? No, we weren't. That would have been totally unreasonable at that point in time.
Kevin?
That leads into another question, Chief. The other oft-asked question is, has a time yet been set up for your detectives to meet with the family to talk to them about events?
We continue to work with the attorneys representing the family to try to establish communication that will resolve all the issues at hand.
Ellie.
I have a question, a follow-up question with this. There's been some criticism that the case has been handled differently because the Ramseys are wealthy. When a poor Latina woman died recently, there was a suspicious death, the police department dispatched a small team of investigators and spoke freely about the findings and issued a pretty detailed reports within about 2 weeks of the incident, even though the case was still under investigation. How do you explain the different treatment that these two cases have received? The difference in the release of information, I guess, would be more specific.
I think that's a very good question, and I think that is also a media question. Why has the media given so much attention to this case and literally no attention to that case you just described? One of the things that has caused us to have to adjust somewhat in our techniques and our procedures is the assault, I would call it, by the media. I have never, in the 28 years that I've been in this business, seen such media focus on an event. And it is in fact intrusive, and it is making it much more difficult to work through this than it was to work through that situation.
So does that explain the difference then, the release of information?
There is a difference in this situation also in that the Ramseys, through advice of their counsel, have decided to take certain precautions. A part of that has led to a lot of speculation about it, which is totally unfair. There's been nothing that's been done either by us or the Ramsey family that is out of order. And so I think the notion that we have treated them differently is actually, any legal expert will tell you that we have handled this case exactly the way it needs to be handled within the guidelines and procedures of the criminal justice process. What makes it appear different is this, that we are all gathered here having to sort this thing out for this community to try to get some leveling in all of the confusion that exists out there about this case. And I think that's a very good question to have asked. I appreciate it.
Well, I had one quick follow-up question with that. JonBenet's death was the first official murder of 1996. Should another murder occur this year, should the family of the victim expect the same sort of attention with 30 police officers from various law enforcement agencies solving their loved one's death?
I think if you go back and assess the homicides that Boulder has had, because they are very infrequent events, what you generally see is a very similar response. Our whole investigative detail responds in the initial parts of the investigation to draw in as much information as is needed. If you go back and look at the Basemar homicide a couple years back, literally the whole investigative division was out there. We printed the whole theater inside and out. It took several days to do that. You don't see that level of dedication to homicides investigations in many places in this country. So again, it gets back to what I said earlier in terms of our track record. We have a very good track record in bringing resolution, bringing the resources to bear on the investigation that is necessary to bring the investigation to a successful conclusion. And that successful conclusion is in a successful prosecution. Okay, for us, it is not just saying, here's who we think was responsible for this act. It is making sure that the case that we put together is successful all the way through the system. And again, if you go back and assess it, I think that's a compliment to the personnel that Alex Hunter has at the District Attorney's Office, as well as my personnel who put these cases together.
Jim?
Recently you removed a key detective in this investigation for talking with the press. How would you characterize the morale of your department in light of that removal, and has that impacted the effectiveness of the remaining detectives and their efforts to investigate this?
Well, you've asked two different questions, and I'll answer the second one first. What is the morale in the Boulder Police Department right now? What's the emotion, the state of mind? I would describe it as being focused. This organization is focused on the work ahead of us and focused to the extent that the distractions around us are not going to knock us off course. The situation with Sergeant Larry Mason is an unfortunate example of what's happened in this case in the handling of it by the media. This is a man who's given many years of good service to this community. A certain set of circumstances developed that required us within our normal processes of the police department to ask him to step aside for a while we investigated those to make sure that there weren't any improprieties. And as a matter of fact, I have put Larry Mason back to work just today. And so, again, what happens, and what has happened all through this investigation, is we have tried to proceed normally through this, and every time we do anything, it gets speculated on. The experts, supposed experts, start offering their opinions on it today, as evidenced by the most recent thing that I don't know if any of you are going to ask about today, and that is the reported confession that took place, and I think was offered by one of the major news networks. And so I'm just here to tell you, one of the most helpful things, if you and your colleagues would like to help us, it would be to back off a little bit and give us some room to do our jobs.
Ron?
Yeah, Chief. So the officers, the first officers that arrived on the scene, you said they conducted a preliminary search of the house. Did they look in the room where John Ramsey said the girl's body was, or did they not?
It doesn't appear that we did. Keep in mind that this house is a large mansion, and it doesn't appear that they got down. That room was down in a part of the basement. It doesn't appear that they got to.
Can I ask you one more quick one?
Sure.
Was there a search warrant in effect when John found the body? And was he allowed to go through the house looking for things on his own, or was there an officer with him?
What had been asked of the Ramseys was, and again, we were still operating under the notion that we had a kidnapping, and we were still waiting for some contact from the kidnappers. And the lead detective who was in the house with the Ramseys asked the Ramseys to go through the house to see if they could determine if there was anything out of place that might help provide some insight to this thing.
So there was a search warrant in effect at that time?
There was not a search warrant in effect at that time.
At 1:30 that day?
I can't be absolutely sure, but I don't think there was a search warrant in effect at that time, Ron.
Mike?
Chief, it's becoming clear that there's a line being drawn in the sand between the Ramseys and the police department. The Ramseys have hired a fairly high caliber defense team. I talked to Pat Corton, the media specialist for the family, who told me today that the family's relying totally on advice of counsel, and that counsel is deciding as to whether or not the interview will ever take place. Meanwhile, a source has told me that in order for this case to move forward, you have to get the forensic lab results, the test results back. When do you expect these tests back, and what would be the first step you'll take?
Well, I'd like to address the first comment that there's a line drawn in the sand somewhere, because I don't know where you got that. And I think that's part of the speculation that's gone on around this case. There's nothing wrong with the Ramseys retaining counsel.
I didn't say there was.
I got the indication from that comment that means that we've drawn lines in the sand. We are still in communication with the Ramseys attorneys, as we have been instructed to do, and as is the rules. We are following the rules, and they are too, and that should not be interpreted any other way than the rules are being applied to try to move this thing along. In response to your question about the evidence, I think I alluded earlier to the fact that we have accumulated quite a bit of evidence in the 8 days that we spent processing the crime scene. I would expect that it will come back incrementally. I don't expect to get it all at one time, and so I can't give you a timetable for any specific piece of evidence that we've collected.
Kevin?
One of the questions that's come up in all the speculation and talk about this case is how police have handled it. I wonder, in the briefing room, I understand that the detectives that had kept a reminder of JonBenet, pictures of her. And I understand
yes.
it's to keep to.
Yes.
I was hoping you might explain why.
Well,
and one would assume it's to remind them of what is involved here.
I haven't asked them that question, but that is accurate. And it gets to my comments that this tragedy has taken its toll on the men and women of the Boulder Police Department. They have been hurt by this, and they are dedicated to making sure that justice prevails in this case.
Allie?
Many people, including officials from other law enforcement agencies, have criticized the department for not thoroughly searching the Ramsey house and securing it immediately after police responded to Patsy's 911 call. What do you think the officers did correctly, and how would you have them respond differently?
I talked to a wise man yesterday, and he gave me a piece that I was hoping you'd ask me something like that. And the comment that this person gave me is this: the less you know, the easier it is to give advice. And I would simply say that those people, and I quite frankly have not heard from many police professionals with that opinion. I've heard just the opposite. I've been in communication with police, respected police personnel around the country. And most legal experts will tell you, police officials and legal experts will tell you, we've done it just right. And so I simply take exception at the opinions that the people you have talked to have offered.
Jim?
How much experience do you as chief and does John Eller as commander of the detective division have in investigating homicides as detectives?
I have no experience running a homicide investigation. I have 28 years in the business with a lot of investigative experience, undercover experience. I was a robbery detective for 3 years doing major robbery investigations. I ran an investigative unit for 3 years of burglary and theft in Houston, which had a caseload of 10,000 cases a month. And so I have a lot of investigative experience. I don't have John's resume in front of me, so I won't try to speak to that. But John has also been in the business and has worked in all facets of policing over the course of 28 years. In fact, I think he's been in the business about 6 months longer than I have. And so all I can offer you is that we have been in this a long time and have a lot of police experiences. And what we know enough about is if we don't know the answer, we go ask. And we are not caught up in our egos and our pride, and we have done that a lot. But managing a case, whether it's a homicide investigation or any other major kind of investigation, has many of the same aspects to it. And we have people within the investigative division who also have a lot of investigative experience and who have been involved in the homicide investigations that we have had over the last several years.
Ron?
Yeah, Chief, two things have been reported so often in the press right now that they're being reported as fact, and you guys haven't really said officially yet, but was she sexually assaulted in some way, and did she suffer some kind of head injury? I know you don't want to be specific, but those things are stated as fact in almost all the press coverage anymore, and you guys, still have been kind of silent about it. Can you put an end to that here?
Does that answer your question?
Silence continues.
If you go back and stack up all of the media things around this and compare them, it's absurd. And it's almost like, why would you even want to comment? Because somebody's going to create some other scenario that you're just going to have to comment again, on top of the fact that it has relevance to the case investigation. So the direct response to your question is I don't care to comment on that aspect of the investigation.
Worried we weren't going to get one of those tonight.
Mike?
Chief, a number of people around the country who we've contacted suggested that you should bring in consultants, especially because this is such a high-profile case. But you appear to be tightening the core of investigators more and more. You've released Sergeant Mason. As I understand, the Sheriff's Department is no longer involved in the investigation. The DA's office now claims it hasn't been briefed in 2 days, short of Alex Hunter. Would you respond to that?
Well, I was in a meeting with Alex Hunter, Jack Wise, and Pete Hofstrom, I think it was yesterday. I'm not sure what you're asking. What we have, the way that we have managed this case, we think fits the situation that we have at hand. And I think we are the only ones that can make a judgment of that. And again, I'm not too concerned what somebody from Chicago, Miami, or wherever you got that bit of advice. I'm not too concerned, quite frankly, about what their position is on it, because they don't know anything about it.
It appears that you're becoming more and more concerned with tightening leaks, stopping leaks, and community favor than you are with using all the resources in the community.
I think that's a misperception on your part. Yes, we are concerned about maintaining the integrity of the case. And you know as well as I know that how many media people are in Boulder right now? 300? We have been absolutely barraged by media, and we have a responsibility, Mike, as you know, to maintain the integrity of this case so that when it gets to trial, that won't be an issue, that it's already been tried in the media. Mm-hmm. And so the perception that we are being very careful and very cautious with the information that we have been able to hang on to, that we haven't had somebody go after, that's just the way it's got to be, and that is good case management.
If I could just follow up, I feel that you're being overly cautious, and that's resulted in this this meeting tonight. Every time I've written a story about you that explains the procedure or the philosophy and not the details of the case, it seems to have a very good effect on everybody.
I'm more than comfortable and have returned every one of your calls to provide you any information you want about how we procedurally do things. What I will not talk to you about is the specific procedures that we are following in this case and the specific facts of this case.
I disagree with you.
I think we have time for one more round. Kevin?
Well, to enumerate, or hoping you might elaborate on something that you said last week, Tom. You said it's not OJ and it's not LA here in Boulder. Our guy won't walk, which some people, you know, given the way this case has gone, people interpret words almost as if it was coming from the late Kim Il-sung. You know, what direction is this going? So I guess my question is, I would assume you meant about the media, the frenzy that followed, but
if I can remember what we were talking about last week, I think the reference is that we are not going to have this case tried in the media.
Hallie?
This kind of touches on what Mike had mentioned earlier. I just wanted to know if you could follow up a little bit on this. Many people say it's understandable and quite prudent, actually, that you have not released evidentiary information about the case. But why is it that you and other officials heading the investigation refuse to address how the department conducted the investigation, and how do you justify saying the public does not have a right to know at this point in time?
Well, part of the comment about the public not having a right to know was taken out of context. What has happened in this investigation is this, that it is something that means a great deal to the Boulder community, and that is why we are here tonight, so that we can have this conversation and that it can be heard in total, uncut, by the Boulder community. But the reality is that this situation is a curiosity to the rest of the country, and quite frankly, it is a sick curiosity in some ways. To give you an example of that, a call got through to me a couple of days ago from someone who lives out of state, and it was giggling and laughter, and it was Chief. I was at work late in my office one night. It says, Chief, we're sitting around a table playing Clue and substituting the situation for what you have in Boulder. Who was it? The dot with the dot in this or that room. That's sick. And so my reference is that there are certain things that everyone is in, certain bits of information that every person is entitled to, and we have provided those pieces of information. And there are other pieces of information that the public is not entitled to know and doesn't need to know, and so it is simply a desire to have their curiosity satisfied, but it serves no purpose. And that is the information that I'm not going to provide to the public.
Jim?
What's been the nature of your conversations with the lawyers and investigators representing the Ramseys? And as a follow-up, could your investigation in this case move forward more quickly were they not involved?
Boy, those are loaded questions. Keep in mind, I am not investigating this case. My role in this investigation is to make sure that my officers have the things that they need to do their work. I am doing that. Also to make sure that my officers are where they need to be in this community around this issue and every other issue. So if they're needed at the school because kids are going back to school and the media trucks are there and they're causing chaos, that my officers are there. And third, to make sure that this police department still runs effectively, given all of the other needs in this community that extend beyond this case. And so Tom Kobe has not been engaging in discussions with the attorneys and such for the Ramseys.
What about your department? What has been the nature of
Again, I can't respond to that because I haven't been present for those conversations. Would the investigation move more quickly without the Ramseys having representation? I just take issue with the question because they are entitled to representation, and
certainly they're entitled, but would it move more quickly without media representatives, private investigator?
What you're asking me to do is to do exactly what I'm concerned about the media doing, and that's speculating about what might happen, and I am not interested in speculating.
They're not getting in the way in any way?
I'm not interested in speculating on that.
Ron?
Yeah, I guess the line is it's gone so far is that you have no suspects and you haven't eliminated any suspects. Is that?
Yes, that's the nature of this kind of investigation.
So, I mean, hasn't the list shrunk a little? I realize that's kind of like contradicting what you're saying, but have you gotten enough evidence in that you're looking in any particular direction more than any other now?
Well, I think it's fair to say that, you know, the list we started with on day one was very long. It is not quite so long. We have accounted for some of the people that we simply had to sort out. Some have been sorted out.
Mike?
Chief, I understand, I know that the Ramseys have the right to legal representation, and they also have the right not to talk.
That's correct.
But it's been 2 weeks since their daughter was murdered, and in those 2 weeks, we've seen only one highly orchestrated appearance by them hugging a bishop on the steps of a church. It would appear to the average person that they have some reason to protect somebody. When will you decide that enough is enough, and would you consider the grand jury?
Mike, I think you're being a little harsh. Have you ever lost a child? And do you know what your reaction would be in that circumstance? And I think what you're getting to, you're getting into an area that I just think is unfair to pursue.
We've had numerous fathers. We've had numerous fathers who have lost their children say, "We went to the police and offered everything to help the investigation."
And that was their case, and that was their situation, and that is not the situation that the Ramseys have found themselves in. And so, to prejudge people, to offer that, which essentially is what you're throwing out on the table, is let's prejudge these people, only adds to their pain, their grief. And I am not going to engage in that discussion.
I'm not speculating that one of them is a suspect. I'm saying that 2 weeks of silence causes the average person to wonder, why are they protecting someone?
Mike, go back and look at, you know, part of the distortion here is what has and what has not been provided by the Ramseys. They have given us hair samples, blood samples, handwriting samples, They have participated in this investigation. What people are concerned about, they don't understand. And because they don't understand, they're going to speculate. And I'm simply saying that our responsibility is to follow the rules and maintain the balance that is required under the legal process. And that's what we are doing.
Kevin, last question.
Tom, it's just going back to the initial moments of when, at the time that JonBenet's body was found, was there a concern now at all that some evidence, some crucial evidence that could link, establish pretty firmly in court who the killer was, might have been lost in those first initial minutes of discovery, or not?
All indications are that we did not. Again, that can be speculated on, but all indications are that we did not lose anything.
Thank you all. Before we close the program, Chief Kobe would like to make a couple of comments. Tom?
Thank you, Leslie. And thank all of you for participating. I know it's been hard on you as well. In fact, I have great empathy for the situation that you're in. I'd like to close with this. First, that the Boulder Police Department has this investigation well in hand, and it is our intention to bring it to resolution through successful prosecution. Second, our community is now in the healing process to recover from this loss. If you have not been part of one of the many debriefings that have been offered during the last 2 weeks and feel like you'd like to have some assistance in dealing with this tragedy, please contact the Mental Health Center, the Boulder Police Department Victim Advocate Unit, or your place of worship. And last, I'd like to say the members of the Boulder Police Department continue to provide for the well-being and safety of this community. The citizens of Boulder do not expect you to be perfect. What they appreciate is the effort and the concern that you have shown them. Take care of yourselves, both physically and emotionally, during this time of really great stress. And as always, take care of each other. And I just want you to know how much I respect and admire each and every one of you. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for joining us, and for all of us at Channel 8. I'm Leslie Ahom. Good evening. And thank all of you.